Alright, what's going on, guys? Try back again. Here to bring you another video. This one's going to be doing a video talking about who I think was the better or is the better Spider-Man actor. We're going to be comparing Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man to Andrew Garfield's. Okay, so this was a viewer requested topic. I apologize to the subscriber that did not, or I did not write down his name. I'm sorry about that. I forgot to do that. But I did think it was a great idea to compare those two, since I have done videos talking about the different Batman actors and things like that. And of course, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is coming out fairly soon, 2014 in May. I believe it's May. The trailer just hit, the first trailer for it, and I did do a video review, give my thoughts on it. If you guys want to see that, click the link in the description. You can go ahead and check that out. But I thought it'd be a good idea. Let's compare the two actors that have played Spider-Man and talk about which ones we think, or who we think is better. Now, that said, of course, the first thing we have to point out is that Tobey Maguire had 3 Spider-Man movies, whereas Andrew Garfield so far has only had 1, and then of course we've just seen some footage with the trailer in that of the second one. Also, we kind of have to compare both as if they're 2 characters, okay? One is Peter Parker, of course, and then the other one is your actual, Peter in the costume Spider-Man. Now, the reason for separation, well, it's kind of an alter ego, but in addition to that, their portrayals are different, of course, and they look a lot different. Now, this, of course, is a subjective topic. You know, who you think is better is really up to you. A lot has changed between the original Spider-Man trilogy and the Amazing Spider-Man new trilogy, possibly 4, maybe 5, depending on whether or not Andrew Garfield wants to continue with Sony and do it. There's some rumblings that he may not want to on the internet past the third, so I guess we'll see how that works out. But this will be comparing them after the first Amazing Spider-Man before seeing the second one, so just based on what we've seen so far from both of them. So I do think Tobey Maguire has somewhat of an advantage in this comparison because he had 3 Spider-Man movies to fully flesh out that character, whereas Andrew Garfield only had 1 from what we've seen so far. Now, let's see. Okay, so in my mind, the way I think of Spider-Man and Peter Parker, when I compare the two of them and I think about it, Tobey Maguire was the one that I saw growing up. When I was in, I think, high school, I saw the first Spider-Man movie in theaters, saw the second one as soon as it hit, and then the third one, I believe I was in college at that time, but I checked that out as soon as that hit as well. I enjoy them all very much. I may do reviews of each of them. Which one do I think is the best? I think the third is easily the weakest, even though it has a lot of action, a lot of big, Venom and Sandman type stuff. My favorite would probably be the second one. Now, that said, in the original trilogy, there's a lot of different, like romantic and almost cheesy by today's standards lines and over the top acting and overacting. If you watch it again nowadays, and I've gone back and watched them for this video and to do reviews of the upcoming Spider-Man movies because I enjoy them. There's a lot of really like cartoony and comic booky scenes and overacting almost from the cast and stuff like this that doesn't feel realistic. This, of course, was before the Dark Knight trilogy, of course, where it was shown the comic book movies could take themselves more seriously. So they were kind of a little goofy at that time, and the original trilogy was. A lot of Tobey's acting is kind of like, it's really dramatic and it's almost overacting, I would have to say. Like the eyebrows and the, like where he's talking to Mary Jane and everything, and like the romantic scenes and everything. It's like, oh, God. But that said, even though it's goofy, it's over the top and all these types of things, to me as a viewer, it reminds me of like a comic, like it's like a comic book on screen. The Green Goblin, the Laugh, and everything. All these different villains and everything. It's not. It doesn't feel realistic. The acting even and the production and everything. But it is a comic book movie. It's based on a radioactive spider, so it's kind of like realistic. I mean, it can't really be. But I feel like the newer version, the Amazing Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield's version of it, or his interpretation of it, is a lot more like it his acting doesn't feel as over the top and as overacting. It's more subtle, and it's not as the facial expressions and everything. It's not as kind of out there. I guess I would say that's the best way I can describe it to you. All around, it's more centered and it's more kind of realistic, I think, than the over the top things with Toby and the way that was. Now that's not his fault. He was directed to behave or to act that way. The scenes were written that way. The cheap poetry and stuff writing, and the initial trilogy it's just silly, and well, it affects the way I see him. But I still, even to this day, see Tobey Maguire as the live action version of Spider-Man when I think of Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield is kind of like, of course, he looks a lot younger, even though I think Andrew Garfield's like 30, but he looks like he's 15. He's really skinny, like vegan skinny, like his neck and stuff, and just really, really skinny, and I don't know, he really fits that role like a high school type Spider-Man character, like Spider-Boy, not Spider-Man. Is how I would kind of compare it. When he's in the suit and stuff, he looks like a little kid running around in a suit, like a teenager, because everyone's bigger than him, and that kind of thing. And again, Spider-Boy, not really Spider-Man. That's a big thing. So, in terms of how they play Peter Parker and which I prefer, Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker is more darker, especially after Uncle Ben and everything. He becomes more angry and all that. And I think he portrays that really, really well. Whereas Peter's, it's kind of like that too, but it's kind of like more goofy and fluffy and over the top. That's the best way I could describe it. It's kind of hard to describe it. I think you guys understand what I'm talking about. So it's really a matter of preference whether you prefer the modern, more badass, but yet Spider-Boy looking type Spider-Man, or you prefer the initial trilogy. When I think about it, there's pros and cons to each. I do like the more badass type Spider-Man that kind of talks more trash to villains as he's taking them down and stuff like that in the newer one, making Spider-Man more badass. But the way he looks definitely isn't, versus the older version that in the costume and everything looks more natural, I think. The costume itself and all that, and Tobey's performance. But when I compare the two and I have to pick just one, I mean, it might change after we see a couple more with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, but comparing the first one to the initial trilogy, I think I have to go with, I liked Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. I liked him more than I like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, especially when they put on the suit. I feel like Tobey's Spider-Man, he looks like a man. Like, he looks like Spider-Man, not Spider-Boy, Granted, I do like the web shooter better with Andrew Garfield, because that's true to the comics. That did not come out of his veins. Granted, it makes sense that if he was bitten by a radioactive spider, he may develop some kind of like a web shooter type thing. Granted, it might not be in his wrists. It might be somewhere else on his body. But that would be weird, depending on where you put it. But you know what I'm saying? That I guess, so I don't mind either interpretation in terms of the web shooters or whatever. But in terms of the costumes and the way they look as Spider-Man, I got to go with Tobey's. The Peter Parker, I like the darker Peter Parker, but I still, when I think of Peter Parker, the comic book version Peter Parker, I think he's closer to Spider-Man from reading it in the 90s and all that, when I used to be big into Spider-Man and the animated series. I'd have to go with Tobey's Spider-Man. It's not an easy comparison for me, because I do like Andrew Garfield a lot too, but maybe I'm biased. Well, of course everyone would be biased on this topic, but I grew up watching Tobey as Spider-Man, so that's why I prefer him as Spider-Man, and I think he's the better Spider-Man, even though there's those silly, romantic, goofy, over-the-top stuff I talked about so much in this video. You guys know what I'm talking about now. Or you better. If you don't by now, then I don't know how else I can describe it to you. If you haven't seen it for a while, go watch it and you'll kind of get what I'm saying. The goofy comedy, silly, over-the-top. And he takes more flack, too. He's like a nicer Spider-Man, versus the newer one. Like, he doesn't try to hurt people, and he's a real good guy, like a classic good guy. That's the way I think of Spider-Man in my mind. So Tobey's my favorite. Anyway, let me know which one you guys prefer. If you prefer the modern-day, newer Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, or you prefer the Tobey Maguire original trilogy Spider-Man. I prefer the original. Just me, just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. I'll call it here. That's it for this video, guys. I'll see you for the next one. This was Trev, and I'm saying peace.